Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar. This is the first of our webinars in our Humanitarian Careers series, and this time we're going to be focusing on water sanitation and hygiene, which we call WASH. And I can see that the participant numbers just going up, so there's a few more people still coming in. As you're coming in, if you want to just put in the chat who you are and where you're coming in from, that would be great. It's always really nice to know who we've got on the call, and we tend to have people from lots of places all around the world. So feel free to just put yourself in the chat there and introduce yourself. And in the meantime, I'll just give you a bit of a background to this series. Tom, if you want to change the slide. And I will also introduce today's presenters. So today's webinar is in partnership with some colleagues from Medair. So we're really excited to have you here today. You can change to the next slide again. So we have on the call today Nadège, who's a WASH project manager from the Ukraine, and Christian Ngang, who's a WASH infrastructure advisor from the DRC, Democratic Republic of the Congo. And then my colleague Tom, who's actually going to be hosting most of this webinar. He's our learning specialist from the HLA, and he's as well on public health and WASH. So a really good team to talk you through what WASH careers look like in different parts of the world. And if you want to change to the next slide. So as this is the first of our Humanitarian Careers series, I just wanted to give, to start with, just a very little bit of background about what we were thinking here. You can move to the next slide. At the Humanitarian Leadership Academy, we have got a really huge network of humanitarians across the world. It makes it a very interesting place to work because you get to be in contact with lots of interesting people all the time. And we've got a learning platform called Kaya, which you might have come across, which has 750,000 learners on it. We also have 6 regional hubs across the world through which we deliver face-to-face training. And we have a second platform called HPass with around 30,000 people on it. So we've got a huge learning community, and we kind of see that as a real potential, I guess, for us to be able to kind of draw on the expertise from across that learning community and be able to advise people that are either looking to get into the sector or are already in the sector and thinking about their next steps. So that's kind of some of the thinking behind why we thought we were kind of really well positioned to start this series. Next one, please. So as you may know, national staff make up over 90% of humanitarian workers in emergencies. We thought we'd just give that as a little bit of background because it's interesting that often in the news you see lots of kind of international staff, people flying in to save the day from different places in the world, but actually it's national staff that are doing most of the work. You can change the slide. And here I just wanted to give an idea of the really vast range of roles and specialisms that you can see in the humanitarian sector. So on the left-hand side there, there's a range of different kind of thematic professions listed. So these are kind of areas of technical expertise that people have in the sector. So today we're focusing on WASH, but some of the other ones that you can see there are, for example, shelter, camp coordination and management, protection, education and emergencies, and things like that. So there's lots of different specialist areas. And then on the right-hand side there, you can see lots of different kind of functional professions. So, for example, communications, advocacy, logistics, project management, all of those kind of cross-cutting professions. And I'm just showing you this to give an idea of some of the types of topics that we might focus on in our future webinars in this series. And so that you can just see the kind of range of skills and backgrounds in the sector, really. And in practice, a lot of roles don't just fall into one of these categories. They might incorporate a number of these different categories. Next slide, please. And in relation to that, of course, people in the sector have to have lots of different types of training depending on their roles. I've just given some examples on this slide here of all the different things that people need to get involved in terms of their learning and training. And I'm sure that Tom and Nadège and Christian will be able to give you a bit of an insight as well into the types of education and training that's involved in their specific area. Yeah, and I guess one other thing to just say is that over the past decade or so, the sector has really started to professionalise, and there are a lot of very professional training courses and competency frameworks and standards and things like that that shape the way that people work in the sector. So there's some really interesting resources and things out there. And again, this is what we're hoping to give you a bit of an insight into through these webinars. So onto the agenda. So I'm going to be handing over to Tom in just a moment, who's going to give you a little bit of an introduction to what WASH is all about and what we're going to be talking about today. We're then going to hear from Christian and from Nadège about their specific experiences through their careers, the different contexts that they've worked in, their career paths and their highlights and the challenges that they face. And then at the end, we'll have a bit of a panel discussion and an opportunity for you to ask questions and things like that. And a little bit of housekeeping. So throughout the presentations, if you want to just type your questions into the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end. Of course, keep questions and comments respectful and on topic, as I know that you would do anyway. And to let you know, if you would like to see translation in different languages, you can go to the show captions section at the bottom of your screen. If you go to more and then go to show captions, you'll be able to select captions in different languages. And with that, I will hand over to Tom.
Great. Thank you so much, Esther, for that welcome introduction. You can hear me well? Thumbs up. Often the first thing to check. It's great to be able to come together. I'm so grateful for you, Nadège and Christian, for being available today. I know you have very demanding roles and busy schedules, so we really do appreciate your time. And it's great to see people joining from across the globe. I did notice a few people calling from Cameroon, from Ivory Coast. I know this evening there is quite a big football match for those who follow football. Ivory Coast are playing in the African Cup of Nations semi-final against the Democratic Republic of Congo. So perhaps some of us are going to be following that closely, but also not to forget Nigeria are playing South Africa as well. So just a brief introduction, welcome. So I've had the pleasure of working with both Nadège and Christian. And just to talk briefly about my background and how I got involved into WASH and where I am today. So today I work for the Humanitarian Leadership Academy with Esther, and I am a technical learning specialist. So I'm looking to use my experience in the WASH sector to help people like yourself joining a call to develop and build the skills that you need to be providing the best quality services that we can. And I started my humanitarian experience in Haiti. So those of you perhaps familiar with the earthquake that hit Haiti early 2010. I was there a year later. I was part of the teams responding to the cholera outbreak. So this is the WASH team that we had at the time. We were collaborating with infrastructure. And I know, Christian, that's your role. You also have an infrastructure hat as part of your role. So we'll be keen also to ask any questions you have about that aspect to Christian. So that's where I started my humanitarian career. And Nadège and I, we had a chance to work together in Madagascar. So there wasn't the same type of humanitarian responses that we were experiencing in Haiti. We had cyclones that were often building in the Indian Ocean off the coast of Madagascar. So we were working with communities to build resilient WASH infrastructure. So imagine raised hand pumps protected from the floodwaters. So a different aspect on the spectrum of disaster risk preparedness and emergency response. And then Christian and I, we got to work together in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that's where I started to move into learning and training and development. So here, this is with the team that I think is in Bunia, up in the northeast of Congo, where Christian, you know the area very well. So I've since moved on to this role that I'm now doing with the Humanitarian Leadership Academy. I've had the chance to see a bit more of the world. I've not got yet to Ukraine, Nadège, but I have been to Poland and worked with people working in Ukraine. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about your experiences. It's been a while since I was in Congo, and so really keen to, hear about what you've been learning and your experiences. And I guess our questions for you today are: tell us about your journey of getting into WASH, into humanitarian work. What have been the key experiences for you, the key milestones? What's helped you develop the skills that you need to deliver these projects and support your teams effectively? So, Christian, you're happy to share first. I've got some photos from you, so do just let me know which ones you want up there. I've got see, I sent you an image with the numbers of the photos. So, and as we go, do post your questions in the chat. There's the question and answer. You put your questions in the question and answer, then we will treat them at the end. But feel free to type them in as we go. And then Christian, you can let me know, just say the number you want of the slide and I'll have that ready for you. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, can you all get me? Okay. So I would like to say thank you, Tom. I'm glad to meet you again on this. Yeah, it was a good experience. Tom used to be a coach for me as well. So it was really nice to see you again. My experience is a little bit diverse because I came from the development sector. I started my studies, academic background in Cameroon, where we have not really strong, in terms of academic, development, in terms of what we can do in the aspects of WASH. But anyway, I developed the interest from that on in terms of the issues that were happening in Cameroon back in 2011, when we had a huge cholera outbreak in the northern regions. And then I started getting interest into how can I help, in developing systems that can help, treat water, especially in the northern regions where they had really arid areas, it's difficult to find water. And so taking an engineering course in industrial chemistry and environmental engineering, and talking with a lot of people, I said, okay, I want to design a mobile water treatment unit that can be able to solve this problem. And in doing that research, then I started understanding a lot what WASH was all about. At that point, I only knew about water, but I started looking deep that it doesn't really depend in terms of resolving cholera issues only by water. You need to go a little bit deeper. You need more than that. So I started looking at, oh, what's WASH all about? Unfortunately for me, I couldn't find an institution that could really give me the core skills in Cameroon. So I bent on really getting an opportunity to study out there. That's when I started looking for scholarships. And I was really, really lucky to have one. I had achieved a scholarship to study in the UK, where I did the WASH course in University of Leeds. That is water sanitation, Masters of Engineering in Water, Sanitation and Health Engineering. And after graduating from the UK, while in the UK, in a way, I did some work with Bywater, which is a water production company. They build water treatment centers across the world. And I had the opportunity to design a sand filtration, a pilot scale sand filtration system for one of the projects that we're planning in Cameroon. And so that gave me an opportunity to work with really some high top class engineers and helped me to really craft my thinking and my approach in terms of doing things in project management as well. And after that, I went back to Cameroon, worked in the development sector, looking at how we can put water like borehole systems, how we can provide water for communities from surface water systems, doing a research project on how to take out persistent organic pollutants from water with the University of Glasgow. So all of that, really pushed me to really trying to get into core water treatment, water quality testing, supplying water for urban cities, supplying water for community area systems. The humanitarian side of me came more when I had the opportunity to work with Medair as a project manager in Bunia. And it was some kind of a major challenge for me as a project manager in the beginning, because getting into a culture which is really not the same culture from where I'm coming from, you have to deal with how do you want to approach your team. So the first thing about all of that was for me able to, how do I integrate the team? Of course, you have the skills in WASH, you have some of the technical skills, but you could have all of that, but you need a team to be able to realize, to be able to achieve the objective. So that for me was the major first challenge, trying to understand that. And when I got that balance in terms to understand what the team is, some of them had more experience in Ituri than me. They've been there for a while, 5 years. Some of the supervisors have been there for more than years. They've worked for different bases. So the first thing for me was how do I learn from these people who have been here before? So it was a great opportunity to really build that team spirit, to understand that we have the same vision, we have the same mission, the same objective. And, really building that cohesion in the team really helped me as a project manager to really organize, to delegate, to plan, and able to achieve some of the objectives. We were really, really a strong team because for the first time, we were able to really get the objectives for one of our major donors, ECHO, achieved within the timeline that was given for us. But I think the key for me there was about the team. So there's this other part of the WASH thing that has to do really nothing to do with the technical, but just have to do who you are. How do you approach people? How do you approach circumstances? How do you manage conflicts? How do you manage challenges within the team? How do you really help to encourage people to put in the best? How do you motivate the team to really get to a certain level of performance? During the time, we've had really some great moments, for me as a team to really grow the program in Bunia, doing water supply systems, building gravitational systems, building latrines in showers in health facilities, approaching humanitarian emergencies, like approaching things like in camps where we were building emergency latrines and emergency toilets, showers, and waste management systems within camp settings. Thereon, I went to to take up the position of an infrastructure and WASH advisor, which then moved to Goma, which is North Kivu. Quite different context, same challenge, building the team again, understanding the team, understanding the people, learning from them, try to understand how do you integrate all of that with the skills you have and try to meet the mission that you have. The challenge is a little bit different. Security challenges are a little more critical. Not easy movement for staff. Access can be a problem. You need to really analyze situations. You need to be able to say, how do we going to move to one spot to another? If there's a challenge, how do you get a team out? So the context in the North Kivu became totally different. In terms of water supply, it will be more water trucking, difficult to put spring systems. You don't have them simple spring systems. You have to look at how do you want to design. In the camp settings, you will have to decide how many people can you really supply. You need to do more coordination with other NGOs, other international organizations on the ground to decide who is going to be able to deliver for this section of the population, who is going to be able to deliver to this section. So it becomes more of a coordination within your team and also with the global WASH cluster, which is really important in terms of achieving these objectives. In the North Kivu also, we found the challenge of an ongoing conflict, which is really critical to our response. And that means things change rapidly in terms of population movements. So you need to make quick decisions. When there's a cholera outbreak, how do you want to rapidly approach that? When there's a flooding, how do you want to approach that? So the intervention becomes totally different. You need to analyze, you need to be to understand, get a deeper evaluation to understand what are you going to intervene, what's the best strategy, and how you're going to do it in terms of logistics, movement of materials, movement of equipment, movement of the team. So it's really that context that becomes really different and very important. The global role for me, it's also really, it's about really having a kind of overview of the program in Congo to try to understand what the donor requirements are. Are we meeting the donor requirements? Are we able to meet the needs of the beneficiary, which is our principal goal, to be able to meet those needs of the people that are out there suffering. So are we meeting those needs? So we have to look at it globally. You have to see if we're achieving those objectives. And as well as really looking at our response. Are we really providing the kind of quality response that we are supposed to? Are we delivering in terms of the toilets? Are we respecting the dignity of the people that we're building these latrines and toilets for them? Are we respecting, are we protection aspects? Are we looking at child protection? Are we looking at gender issues? Are we looking at, prevention of gender-based violence, while carrying out our approach in those communities that we're working at? So it's very important for us. One of the very, very big, plus for me, or, best moments for me is when we were able to continue as an organization to provide water in the camp. This is what you call Busharaga. You can even see that's the image there, where most of the organizations that were supplying water at this time had moved out because the funding the project had ended. But as an organization, we continue providing that water because it was dry season and we knew it could be difficult for that population. So we decided to continue providing water using private funding until the point where we got to a raining season where we thought that they could at least have some water. And if we don't have the recent pictures for this one, but we have built really some kind of a rainwater harvesting system that we capture in the water and treating it and giving it to the population. To me, it's something that I find very satisfying because the moments that if you lack water in such places, you will be shocked to see the number of people that are sitting there with empty containers just waiting for water to come. So, I mean, something that to me, I find really, really, really applaudable for what we did. The job never goes without some challenges. You will, of course, find a lot of challenges, the security challenges. Sometimes there are a lot of challenges in terms of, movement of teams. Sometimes you can go and sometimes the teams have to be called back. And sometimes you really have to look at, is this approach the best? And the donor requirements, are they restricting us? We can do more than these. Those little challenges really have to make you craft your response in a way that you can balance all of that. We need the funding. We need to deliver to the beneficiaries. How do you want to balance all of that as well? And to me personally, the most challenging moments as the WASH advice is when you're doing the proposals, because the proposal time you need to spend a lot of time writing those proposals to make sure you get the right proposals, to make sure you get every little detail that is important for you in your intervention. And for us as an organization where we have a multi-sectoral approach, where we integrate in health, WASH, nutrition, we have cross-cutting aspects that we going alongside, like protection, now environment as well. So it's really a moment that, it's time consuming and it's proper brainstorming, in its consultation from the other team members, in its collaboration for us to be able to put that. So it's something very challenging to do that as well. And as well as reporting, the moments that you need to put the right reports, you need to put the right details, you need to put the right information, you need to show what you're doing, are you meeting the objectives? So as WASH advisor, it really needs you to get that focus. It needs you to understand on the ground what's happening globally in the country-wise, in terms of realizing the indicators in place for you. So those are sometimes really challenging moments in doing this job. And I will also say that in terms of new things, there are actually new trends now in the humanitarian sector and the WASH, which are really somehow affecting the way of helping us or wanting us to look at things in different way. Like environmental safeguarding, we have to now look at how do we want to approach humanitarian in terms of our interventions. How do we do our logistics? How do we do our procurement? How do we do our fleet? Are we integrating the aspects of reducing so many movements, reducing plastic waste, reducing materials for construction that are not durable, that are going to be found in the environment? How do we want to develop systems that are not using a lot of energy, like grid energy or fuel energy? Maybe we construct simple spring sources that flow by gravity, or maybe we construct gravity-fed systems that the water flows by gravity and the population catches. So there's a lot of that aspect, reducing, deforestation. For Congo, for example, there's a lot of deforestation because the wood is being used to burn bricks, locally made bricks. So there's a lot of deforestation and a lot of construction activities. You need to use those bricks. So we as an organization also, we're looking at how do we reduce that? How do we help, teach the population or the laborers how to produce the cement bricks that we can use? So the environmental part of it is something that we integrated more and more into our approach here in ETRC, and as well as having an environmental management plan, which is something that we really pushing now throughout the country program for each base to be able to come out with an environmental management plan, which really shows how they mitigate the different actions or negative, impacts, things that have negative impacts in the environment. And I think with Thomas, we did what we call the Need Plus, which is a very good tool that has been developed to be to do this need assessment, environmental need assessment. And one of the cross-cutting things, again, I would say is protection. more and more we're seeing protection coming into the interventions for WASH. How do you want to integrate people living with disabilities? How do you want to do child protection? How do you want to integrate gender? How do you want to do your designs for your latrines? Are they really protecting? Are they preventing that causing harm to other people, to no harm? You know, so we look at all of that aspects of accountability to affected population. You want to be accountable. So we're really looking at all of those aspects as well now in the WASH projects. So it's not really about all of that designing skill, all of that technical skills, not all about huge academic engineering that I said in the beginning. You need those skills, but you need more than that. Also, you need other social skills. You need to be able to understand the cultural context. What are the things that are acceptable in the communities here? They might be acceptable in Sudan, but might not be acceptable in Congo. How do you do the designs? Are the toilets that you're going to build, are people going to use them? We've seen in Bunya where we've built a latrine and put tiles inside. And sorry, a shower. People didn't use those showers because they're not used to using those kind of showers with tiles. You know, so you need to look at the context of that community, of that people. Is it really socially acceptable? Is it culturally acceptable? And of course, resource management. We don't want to just go build, you know, very fancy infrastructure in a place and leave, but does it really worth it? You need to look at the need. What is the need for those people? In certain cases for us as an organization as well, we have focused, thank you, Tom, focus on maternity because we realize that a lot of mothers that are giving birth are really, there's a lot of death, you know, due to, you know, because they don't have these basic facilities that can help them, you know, to able to, you know, keep the kids safe and keep the mother safe after birth. So we will focus as well as building maternities, which means we need to have the skills in drawing, AutoCAD, for example, you know, SketchUp, for example. So those skills are some of the skills that we need in the sector that helps us really to come up with these, you know, really good designs to provide the kind of services, provide the kind of needs for the beneficiaries or the people that we're trying to serve in different communities. And you see, we're trying to plant grass around. We have different systems that we do in different places.
Great. Thank you so much, Christian. It's really exciting and encouraging to hear about all your hard efforts, your hard work, and just what struck me from your sharing. We'll have a chance for questions and answers after we've heard from Nadège, but we want to hear from you both first. But I was really struck by the way you were talking about the work of creating that team, that collaboration, the coordination, and as you say, the technical experience and skills that you developed training as an engineer, you've added to that in so many different ways. It's really, really encouraging to hear. So we will have a time for question and answers. You can pose your questions to Christian later on. So do type them in the question and answer, and we will come to those later. But now we're going to move to Nadège. Nadège, you've spent some time working in South Sudan, in Afghanistan. You're currently in Ukraine. Do you want to tell us about your experiences and what you've been learning in your role, in this new role in Ukraine? Thank you.
Yeah, hello everyone. So, I'm Nadège. I'm a French, so sorry for my accent. I'll try to to make myself be understood, and yeah, sorry for struggling in English. I hope
very clear,
I'm not the
very
only
clear.
one. So yeah, I've been working with Medair since 2014. So I come from a little bit of different background from Christian. So basically, at 16 years old, I knew I wanted to be a WASH PM and to work for Humanitarian because I had two passion in life: traveling, meeting new people, helping as much as possible, and adventure. So I'm coming from a place where I wanted to have the thrill of meaningful work. And I understood quickly at the age of 16 that water was a major sector that could influence a lot of people and give a lot of good results. I was interested in the scientific part of studying. So having that in mind, I made a goal for studying in this sector. So I studied in water treatment, hydraulic specialty as a engineering background. But I also went to a specialized institute, private institute that's the name is Bioforce. It's well known in the French world to train WASH PM in the humanitarian context. So with all this package, I started with Medair with the will of helping as much as I could, but being more as technical as possible to provide the right help. So when you start humanitarian, you discover that there are these two different places. Either you go to relief work, humanitarian, so fast response to help people recover from a crisis, or to development world, where the project lengths are longer, and most of the time it's a bit more difficult to find fundings, basically, but it can be super meaningful because you change a small scale of a village. So it's a good place where you are fascinating by seeing long-term influence. But I was more thrilled by the fast pace of emergency response. So this is where I decided to spend most of my time. So starting with Medair with Tom in Madagascar was a huge experience for me, as I was super young and fascinated by all this adventure. We were in a very remote place in Madagascar and reaching people by canoe, doing drilling, hundreds of borehole drills, designing new water system, so going into the jungle, finding a source and bringing water to people. This was amazing. As a first experience, this is what I recommend. Basically, learning skill as technical is very essential. So you have a broad overview of what could be the answer technically when you face something, because water treatment is quite broad. So you do need to have this engineering background to understand what kind of response could be more adapted based on this situation you face in the ground. But also, it's good, I would say, to start slowly, because in the humanitarian world, if you have some experience, you get to grow in your position very quickly if you get the chance, because they are recruiting all the time, teams are changing all the time, and if you are just ambitious about the money and your career, you will aim for a high position very quickly with big responsibility. I do not think it's a good idea, because to do this work, you still need to remember why is the reason you do this work. The main reason is to help as best as possible the people you serve. And for that, you do need to have slowly built your knowledge about technical and how to do a good project management, to design a project well, and to, so growing experience takes time. And I would encourage you to just think of this when you face some big donor who can give you a big salary. It can be attractive for sure. But for me, it just kept me focused in keeping low and building up slowly my career. So since 2014, I started with Medair. I'm still a WASH PM, project manager. And now I feel confident to become an advisor. Basically, just because I had multiple experience. My first experience was in Madagascar, in the jungle, doing hydraulic designs and this kind of things, building up knowledge in drilling. So now I'm able to advise on this kind of activities. Then I went to Haiti for the emergency response. I'm now able to advise on what could be an emergency response and the craziness of it. And then I went to South Sudan as a WASH PM. I started with the Ebola cholera response. Then we sent a team on emergency response for crises like famine, or like drilling new boreholes, treatment of surface water. There is a lot of variety of response that technically can exist. This is why by doing slowly and try to do a good assessment of the need, this is essential. And if you don't have this experience as a starter, like going to the field, meeting the people, and assessing the needs, trying to understand with the need and with the resources we have around what could be the best response. This makes you become a good WASH person, I think. So yeah, and all this building knowledge led me to Afghanistan and then now to Ukraine. So in Ukraine, I have few photos of what could be the work I'm doing right now in Ukraine as a WASH project manager covering for advisor in the same time. So 2 positions in the same time. So basically we try to rebuild damaged infrastructure from strikes because we are serving places that was taken by the Russian army and the Ukrainian took it back 1 year ago. We could see the targeted, so they were shooting on water infrastructure like this water tower or the destroyed borehole source of water. This is a borehole that was destroyed by shelling, so we need to repair. So this was my visit of this week, and this is how it looked like on every day. So this is something I find very fascinating about my work is you get to build the project from the very beginning. I first arrived in Ukraine, we had no WASH team. So I had to come and assess the need myself, see what could be the best appropriate response to match the needs of the people we want to serve. Understand that we need this kind of engineer. I need to recruit this kind of people. I'm building my own team to make things possible. I'm building my own project to have for a proposal for a donor to give us the money to repair this borehole. And so from the beginning until the end of the project, you see all the stages. It's not like when you go in engineering in the private sector, where you will do only a design and you will see a small portion of the work. You might go to the field to see the results sometimes in the private sector, but not all the time. But here you can see from the scratch, you think of the idea, you do the calculation, the drawing with the help of your team, you do the recruitment, you train your team, you make it work like you want, and then you enjoy the problem and and the success as well until the end. So it's a beautiful work. I do love it. Sometimes it's challenging. It's a lot of work. Most of the time you will end up doing not just your job, but covering for other people because a lot of turnover and because it can be difficult to find the people to recruit in your team. Sometimes I'm doing PM and manager and I'm going for supervision of the work if I have to, because the work needs to happen anyway. So the workload can be very, very big, but the reward is you're serving the people who to get water. It's a beautiful, it's a beautiful reward. Some of the highlights in my career, as I am a junkie for adrenaline, I get to serve people in Haiti by helicopter rides. Nowhere in the world you can do engineering in a helicopter. I was doing assessment of the needs by taking photo of the destroyed villages and then focusing on finding the most damaged places to do a response. This was a trail in Madagascar. We had to reach people by canoe, like 1 day canoeing. When I was younger, I was good. Now I'm not sure I'll do it again. Yeah. But seriously, the most beautiful experience I have so far was in Afghanistan, in a place where you can imagine is very challenging. And so I came just after the Taliban took over in Afghanistan. The WASH team was 0, only one person was there. And I had the privilege to start a new team, to train this team to be efficient enough so now they can apply for big donors such as ECHO, and to provide water to villages in the middle of Afghanistan where it's very dry and villages don't have zero access to water. So it's a beautiful accomplishment. Like I really like humanly. It's not just technically. You get to build your team, and the interaction you have with this team, it makes you feel so proud, and it's like your baby. So I still have some interaction with this team, and I will never forget them. What could be some challenge you might face? I told you about the workload. This is inevitable. This is not a place to be if you want to have a cool work. But yeah, we had some bad experience, like terrible experience in South Sudan, where some team member were killed because we are going to places where unfortunately insecurity is present. So it's also part of your job as a project manager to have a good understanding of the security context. So you do a little bit of geopolitics as well, and management of the security. We had, for example, in South Sudan, when we sent a team in a place where we know the security can be tricky, we had a plan B every time, like a helicopter was always ready to go. If we see a troop movement, the military are moving toward our team, we send the heli to evacuate our team straight away. So it can be stressful to be responsible for the security. And sometimes, yeah, bad news happen. But it's good to have a good NGO who know how to deal with this kind of issue. So it's not just your fault, but you have a team, and you have a way to deal with difficult circumstances. Because WASH is not just, as Christian shared, not just the technical part of it. It's also the team life. It's also management, and yeah. So I would advise you to, if you want to become a WASH in an NGO, yeah, to focus your training in engineering for sure, because you do need to have the technical skills, but project management is needed as well, and to have in mind this holistic approach. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Nadège and Christian. So if you do have any questions, we've got time for the Q&A. Do post them in the question and answer section, or put them in the chat, and we'll come to those in a moment. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Nadège. And I think what I noticed from both of what you're sharing is that it sounds like having those foundational technical skills experiences is really key. But actually in the humanitarian sector, the role, because the nature of the projects, like you say, Nadège, you go through the entire program cycle perhaps in 1 year. In a consultancy firm or in a development project, you might not get to see all of the program cycle and be involved in every aspect, but in humanitarian work, you definitely are. And also the way in which your role expands beyond what you might traditionally think as a technical expertise role. You're responsible for designing the projects, preparing the project proposals. Christian, you spoke of the importance of coordination. You're thinking about access, security, as both of you've mentioned. So yeah, just to appreciate the breadth of the role. And we've got one question already come through, which I'll pop into the chat so you can see. I think this is a question for you, Christian. Can you expand? This is a question from Edward Rhodes. Can you expand on environmental safeguarding in WASH programs? Can you give any examples from recent projects? So Nadège or Christian, feel free to respond, because I know, Christian, you spoke about environmental safeguarding. You mentioned a Neat Plus tool that you've been using. Do you want to tell us a bit more?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, definitely the approach we've been using GRC is really an approach where we want to understand the needs exactly in terms of the impact of what we do to the environment. So we have an environmental need assessment that we do using the Neat Plus tool, which is a well-developed tool that really incorporates, most of the aspects in WASH. And when we, when we use the tool, we have to put in like the things we do, like the kind of latrines, the kind of water systems we build, the kind of infrastructure. We look into the climate, the geology, the geography of the areas that we work in. And the tool really has been developed in such a way that it can come up with recommendations in terms of really severe impact, moderate and really less severe impacts. And so as an organization, we study that, we take those recommendations and be able to say, how do you want to mitigate the really severe impacts? A clear example for us is we will prioritize really constructing or rehabilitating simple spring sources. Because with that, it's easy for people just to, we do the capture of the spring source, we protect it, and then we make sure we build it in such a way that the population can get access and get, potable water. Another example for us for health facilities is we just want to really encourage our secondary sources of water, building rainwater harvesting systems where we want to capture the water. So we would really not really invest a lot into building systems that we want to use, fuel, diesel fuel, or use grid energy. So for us, we have those changes that we implementing into our approach. It's not really, it's difficult for the humanitarian context to really focus more on the environmental because we are an emergency organization. We want to make sure we deliver the needs of the population, but we try, to have a certain level of integration, bit by bit in terms of our activities, in terms of our response. And as well, we're looking at it. I think we develop a green office tool, which we also monitoring in terms of what are we buying in terms of plastics waste and what is different approach for logistics for fleet movements of cars and all of that, which is helping us. We're still not really having a clear, outright, let me say, understanding to say, okay, we can say we want to, able to measure carbon offset. No, but we want to try, really to put in place just little actions. Again, like we want to use more cement bricks than using burn bricks because there's a lot of deforestation for burn bricks. I hope I've tried to answer your question.
Still, after many years of using Zoom, we still mute ourselves from time to time. Thank you so much, Christian. And yes, sounds like you've been incorporating environmental safeguarding as a cross-cutting issue throughout your program design and delivery, and there are now more and more tools perhaps available to you to facilitate that process. We have a question from Priscilla Wang, and I've just popped it in the chat. Question for you both. What is the toughest moment, toughest challenge in your career as a WASH-related staff, and how did you solve the challenge? So that's a big question, but you've also already mentioned some of your challenges you've experienced. But yeah, Christian or Nadège, would you like to answer that question from Priscilla?
I'll let Nadège go first.
I'm sure there's lots you can choose from, Nadège, so perhaps just see what comes up.
I would be interested to understand if the question means technically or broadly.
Yeah, great. Priscilla, if you want to type in the chat, you referring to technical challenges or broader challenges? Sounds like you've both had to experience problem solving that's not necessarily a technical nature. But Nadège, what would you say? Perhaps share one of the challenges, one of the toughest challenges you've had. Broader challenges, Priscilla says.
We have a lot, and there are all the time new challenges. So you think you are learning, and then you will need use this skill you learned in the next project, and you face a new challenge. What would, just on top of my head, it happened in Afghanistan that I was not able to implement the activity. So we had a budget to do implementation of water spring in a village, but because of the Taliban, they wanted to guide us on the way we should do it by preventing certain thing to happen, like working with women and this kind of things. So they wanted also to have to influence our recruitment. So some unacceptable things were discussed with the Taliban and us, so they stopped us in working, and we had a negotiation ongoing for 1 year until we had to get rid of the money and to give it to another. So still we spend this money, but in another region. So I was not able to successfully give water to the people where we identify was most in need, unfortunately. So it was in a place where they were dying from malnutrition. So they had diarrhea, chronic diarrhea, and because of they were drinking from the river directly with no treatment, they needed a source of water. So it was very tough, and we tried all we could until we had to make a difficult choice.
Yeah, sounds very difficult, Nadège, and I appreciate you mentioned negotiation, and I imagine that's also a core skill that you look to develop in your work in humanitarian work, because yes, there will be circumstances or certain stakeholders in a project that you do need to get permission from or engagement with, and yes, unfortunately, sometimes there are some requirements that other stakeholders may place on us that we're not willing to do, and that's very, very difficult. But I think that draws us back to the principles of humanitarian work, and I think something for everyone to be thinking about is the ethics of our work, and that yes, we're based, all our responses based on the humanitarian imperative, but we do have also the stance of being impartial, neutral, independent as organizations, and that does make it, yes, does give rise to these challenging issues. Christian, do you want to also share from your experience? Thank you, Nadège.
Yeah, I mean, just like Nadège said, this is really you can face all kinds of challenges, on a daily basis. But I can remember one as a project manager, and for me it was a little bit shocking because we were building some kind of maternity that's in the eastern part of Congo, and what we do normally is that some certain localities we will do a lot of stock of materials because we don't want to move this in terms of transportation, moving materials, so we will stock them. And one day when we came to the site, then we realized there were about 100 bags of cement that were missing. Then I was like, wow, how do we deal with this? So it really has nothing to do with the wash, has nothing to do with designing, but just had to deal with something that have to do with even the security. And it was difficult for me to understand, who do I trust? The supervisor on board that was supervising the project, the laborers that he had recruited to run the project, the committee that we had put in place to supervise the movement of materials. So you can imagine the time it took for us to do an investigation, trying to find out where did the problem come from and all of that. And you have to do an incident report. So the directors are asking for that. They need to see what happened, what really went wrong. It was really challenging for me, as a project manager to deal with that, because even I had to question sometimes, the honesty of my team, just to understand what really happened. So it was really difficult to navigate that. And we did investigations and then found out that something was happening within the community and some of them missing. But again, we had that broader discussion with the community and they said, okay, they will be able to put back the cement and stuff. But it was difficult for me to really manage that process at that time because we had to stop the work and really go on something that had nothing to do with delivering the wash services at that time.
And with hindsight now, Christian, what do you think could have helped you for that experience?
Well, what I got from them is that we could, really do a weekly spot check. So what I did was I designed a spot check, sheet for the supervisors. So what you do, every area where we're doing use stocking of materials, I have to see the weekly spot check. So you send that as part of your report, then I have to see and we do a check and know exactly what is going on, what's left, what's been taken out. So that was the kind of a measure we did after that. Yeah.
That's great. That's great to hear. And I remember working with the team in DRC, Medair. We were looking at bills of quantity, spending lots of time checking estimations of materials, and yes, making sure you have systems in place, because yes, you're working in areas where you may need to leave items in a building or with community in remote locations. Access is a real challenge, so having those checks and balances is very, very important, having a system in place. But yes, otherwise it does take up a lot of time, and investigations, negotiations adds to already a very full and demanding workload. We have a question from Omar, which I'll put in the chat for either of you to answer, and it's about sustainability. So we've been talking about humanitarian response, and what about sustainability? So what can you be doing at a humanitarian project to look at longer term sustainability, handing over infrastructure to local users?
Can I go?
Who has the floor?
Go ahead, Christian, if you're ready.
Yes, so I think we've been approaching that in different ways for us, as well as building resilience in the community by training. For health facilities where we intervene, we will really do some kind of real training on how to manage or how to maintain the infrastructures that we've built. We've been able to say, how do we want the community to continue with certain activities? For example, we will build systems and we will incorporate like chlorination systems, where we want to train them to know to produce those chlorine solutions themselves and continue the process. We want to also help the community time, in terms of really looking at how they can protect and, the infrastructure. For example, we will build standpipes in communities, but the community themselves take the ownership. So they take the ownership in terms of the usage. So we help them in terms of how do you manage this, but they take the ownerships. Sometimes we build those standpipes, but the community have using, wooden, sticks and protected the standpipes, and they even put locks on it to control wastage, in terms of water going out and kids destroying that. So we really build some of these infrastructures with the community in mind. And so discussions with the community before and after is very important for us as an approach when we going into, intervening in those communities. So that's one way I'll say. For like the rainwater harvesting system, we realize that in some communities, we are not really able to really meet the general need of the population, but we have been able to, for example, like in Kibati, in North Kivu here, where we realize this really longer heavy rains, seasons. So we built a bigger storage for a reservoir, 80 cubic meters, that can capture more of the rainwater, which was something that wasn't existing before. So the community can, really continue benefiting from having at least some water than having no water at all. So we're looking at those different, in terms of hardcore and in terms of soft wash, what we can do to improve the sustainability. Thanks.
And I will say for my case that it will depend a lot on the length of your project. Of course, if you have 1 year project, then the sustainability will be a key part of your project. From the beginning, you need to involve the community, as Christian describes, and then training of like water community users, people who can do the maintenance, they can collect the money to make it sustainable. This is the best practice, the best way to do it. Sometimes you don't have so much time to implement such a system. So, for example, in Ukraine, what we are facing right now, the army is destroying dams. So we see floods, and then the water that used to be sustainable for the people to drink and to use disappeared on the ground, and the water table level is very low. So as a first emergency response, the solution for 1 year was to provide water trucking to this population. And while doing this, some partner, Medair is trying to do that as well, do new drillings. But this is in challenging places where you would see the water is too deep for so sometimes it's super costly, but sometimes the water is salty, so a technical problem arises and you don't have time to resolve all of this. So you need in between as well. Sometimes in a context like South Sudan, for example, where it's an ongoing crisis. It's an ongoing emergency state. Even the donor doesn't want to fund sustainable water points because they know they will be targeted again and destroyed again after 1 year. So you find yourself in this two seats where you want to provide as much sustainability as possible, but also you need to compromise sometimes.
Yeah, thank you, Nadège. Thank you, Christian. Yes, it sounds like very complex, like you're saying in Ukraine at the moment, Nadège, where the landscape is changing, the hydrological landscape is changing as a result of the conflict, and the decisions you have to make at what level of repair or provision do you provide to meet immediate needs and the risk that it could be targeted again in the future. And Christian, what you were sharing reminds me of some of my work in Haiti, where we were looking at installing new water supply systems, hand pumps, drilled hand pumps, and we worked with a local organization who had lots of years experience of working with communities to develop those community committees to look at the longer term sustainability maintenance of facilities of the hand pumps that we'd been installing during our emergency project. So I think looking for those collaborations was also really important. There's a few more questions coming through in the chat. Sharon Jeremiah, you'll see it up in the chat a few questions ago, but she's asking about water treatment. So if you're providing water to, say, an internally displaced people's camp or host communities, what experience have you got of treating chemical elements? So she's mentioning arsenic, iron, nitrate, nitrates, fluoride. They can be challenging to treat because it requires complex systems. But what about local solutions? Medair and Nadège, you want to share from your experience on that? I know you've got one. Or
Yeah.
Christian.
So in Madagascar, yes, we had to face a very high concentration of iron in the water. So we designed. So at this point, the drilling was a manual drilling, so shallow drilling. We designed a small system to filter this iron by providing oxygen, so precipitation and then filtration inside of the borehole casing, basically. The people were climbing up because it was a flooding area. So we wanted to protect this borehole from the flood. So it was naturally designed to be up with stairs, and people were, it was a hand pump pumping it. So all this platform was used to treat the iron. So it's part of the very rewarding thing you do in humanitarian. If you are very curious and you are technical enough, then you get to have this kind of chance to pilot new ideas based on what challenge you are facing. Most of the time when your project is not long enough, you tend to avoid this difficult challenge and to provide water that is not polluted, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you, Nadège. It sounds like there's an opportunity to be creative in humanitarian projects where perhaps if you're, one of the questions I had was when you're working in remote locations, how do you find dealing with those technical challenges? Do you have many resources available to you to find your answers? How do you, when a problem comes your way, what process do you go through to find a solution? And if it's a question for either of you, perhaps a follow-on from what Sharon asked.
I feel like I'm talking too much, maybe Christian.
No, it's
Well, I mean, for DRC, we're not really been involved in dealing with boreholes. In the eastern part in Turi, we're more dealing with capturing simple spring sources, and most of the times, what we understand from that is just maybe E. coli, biological contamination. But what we do, the first control for us is using the Delagua kit. So we need to have some of that skills to be able to use the Delagua kit to be able to take water samples, and then we analyze them. And then exactly we want to treat. For a measure for us is a bit also really with the water committee to treat them how to use chlorine or use aqua taps, and how to continuously doing prevention in terms of contamination or recontamination of water in those areas. In the northern part of Congo, North Kivu is more water trucking, where we have huge camps, and here the government is in charge basically for water. So what we do as an organization is measuring the level of chlorine in those water to make sure it is within the standard that is required before we do supply to the areas that we have put up our reservoirs. So we have a very limited control in terms of that, because the government itself really managing the water supply. It's some kind of a business for them. So they only allow you to probably, able to carry the water. But of recent, I think the Global Wash Cluster here has been improving on that, because they have also been able to put up really huge storage tanks where they have done the analysis, and they make sure that the organizations that are able to, distribute water in the camps can collect the water and distribute in the camps. So we work in partnership with the Wash Cluster in terms of the analysis for the water that they're distributing. But we're really not involved in underground water sources where we can have arsenite and other fluorides that are possible, contaminants that we can find in underground sources here in TLC.
You raised a great point at the start, Christian, that the first step is obviously being able to analyze the water. So having the skills, the equipment, the know-how to use the kits. Portable kits can be really helpful, because you can, I remember with Nadège in Madagascar, we would be doing using the Delagua kit out in the rainforest locations in the villages. And so making sure you've got the skills, staff, equipment to do that testing, to find out what the problem is. I think that's a first key point. Nadège, did you want to add to that question about the process that you go through when you're solving technical problems? Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think it will really depend on the context you are in. So, for example, in Madagascar, we had very limited funding, but we have a lot of time. So it's the perfect setting to pilot new things based on, like, the basics, the theory, and now you need to practice. So what we did for this iron removal system was a small pilot on the backyard of our house, basically, with a drum. What kind of material was the best for the filtration? We find out that quartz was present in our area, and because of the porous of the stone, porosity was super high, so it was a very good filtration gravel. So we took 1 year to test multiple solutions, and we even asked engineer who was a student engineer to come and help us to do the testing and the study as an internship. So this was his thesis for the year. So good opportunities such like this with limited, very limited resources. In places where, like here in big crises where all the attention of the world is in Ukraine and we have huge funding, it's very different. Then we have laboratory, we don't do the test ourselves. People are willing to provide super expensive filtration equipment. We are using raw filtration, so reverse osmosis, so you do the test based on the water you have and what is the pollution, what is the solution. Technically, you have different range of contractor who are designing this kind of equipment. You contact them. Sometimes they are willing to give you the equipment. Sometimes you just pay because in such a crisis you have more fundings. So yeah, it will really depend on your situation.
Good point, Nadège. So perhaps in some contexts you might have a bit more time, but maybe be in more remote locations like Madagascar, and perhaps in other contexts you've got access to a lot more resources and funding and laboratories or technical expertise. But yes, I do remember the quartz in Madagascar and its nature of, and I think that's a good point to highlight, using what's available, bringing in people who've got the time to do the research like you did with the student. And I know, Christian, you started with your presentation about looking to build and foster that team dynamic, and being able to fill in and help each other out is really, really key. We have another question coming through in the chat from Deselgen. Water trucking. I think both of you have mentioned water trucking at some point. How long is it possible. Now, there might be some people on the call as well who are in contexts where water trucking is still used a lot of the time. Do either of yourselves have a response to that? Nadège, you're nodding your head. Would you like to respond to that question?
We know some countries, they are not in emergency state, they are still using water trucking, so it can be very long. And you need to have a sustainable water source that is providing good quality water to stop water trucking.
And perhaps just also Desalegn is asking about how can we develop sustainable water for the community. I remember in Haiti, it wasn't part of my project, but I heard that a organization had been trucking water to one of the internally displaced people's camps in Port-au-Prince, the capital of Haiti, after the earthquake. People had been displaced, and they actually found that later on they realized they'd spent all this money and time and effort treating this water, getting it into tanks, tap stands, but people were going to local kiosks for their drinking water because they trusted the local kiosks. So also in terms of sustainability, is thinking about, well, what existing services are there and where can we support what's already functioning? We don't necessarily need to bring in everything new or a different level of service, different service provision. We've got a few more questions in the chat. I think we had a great question. Well, somebody asked, how do you get started? How would you start your wash career? What's the first steps you would look to do? What would you say to that question? I think we had a question from Abdoulaye. Where can someone start their wash career?
It's quite an interesting question.
It's a great question.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it starts from passion. You know, if you get passion in what you're doing, everything you want to succeed in life, you need to have passion for that. To me, I built my career from the passion to really understand what water is all about and how can I help provide, drinking water, and trying to learn more, trying to fight to understand more into that aspect. The only way you can build that in certain points, getting experience, and it's by, just applying for, you could do local organizations, international organizations, internships, volunteering. Those are different aspects. And then it didn't start for me like, just after school, then I got this job in this international organization. No, it's a learning process. You learn along that and you keep learning every day. Because like Tom said, the context is different, things changing rapidly. You can see you really have that all understanding. So I think you need to have that passion. You need to have the willingness to learn more, to research in the sector, to understand what's going on, to find out where are the current trends, to find out where are the, and then you need to build interest. You can know everything. Build interest in something. For me, it started on in water. That's where my interest was. How do I really design water systems that can provide water to communities? And in that part of really understanding findings, getting to organizations in the sector and applying and trying for volunteering, trying for internships, and then you get into it one way or the other, just trying by doing that. Yeah, but you need to find one angle of it, because you can be an expert in sanitation, waste management, water. You can't just be an expert in everything. It's not possible. You need to find where your passion is and you work with that. I mean, that's my contribution.
Thank you, Christian. Yes, the challenge is perhaps we want to be an expert in everything. And we can't, but we do need to have a broad appreciation. But perhaps there are elements that we do become more specialist with or more familiar with. Nadège, you wanted to respond as well to that question.
No, I do think it's very important, as you said, a broad understanding of a little bit of everything. Knowing that most of the time in the humanitarian sector is not like a huge project like you will do in engineering private sector, where you will construct big water treatment plant in this private sector. But in humanitarian, you will find yourself most likely doing small scale to medium scale infrastructure, which can be a little bit frustrating for a typical engineering mind. And it's, of course, super rewarding when you have a big work to monitor with big sketches and a lot of design, but it's not all the time happening. So I would say how to start by being trained as having the broad understanding of what is water, sanitation, and hygiene. Hygiene is the sometimes left alone. But in some cases, I also find people who have just a background in hygiene and think they can become a wash, not having any engineering background, and I don't recommend it. At least you need to have some interest in the calculation design and what could be the solution in water treatment. Having a project management background or understanding of how to do project management, it's key as well. So all this background, then you cannot start by internship in Medair. I don't know for the other NGO, because you do need to have some you need to have a solid experience. So I would suggest starting with the private sector in different area. For me, I started in a consultant firm where we were designing small sewage individual treatment, and we were doing also environmental impact of a sewage plant, this kind of things. It was super interesting. So technically I built up knowledge as well. I also have some knowledge on the private sector in biogas, and I also did 3 years of foreman in the private sector to build water treatment plants and to start them. This kind of this is super useful because in the private sector it's more technical and more I don't know how to say in English. It's more technical. It's just focused in the engineering. So it's quite good to have this kind of background as you start.
Thank you, Nadège. Exactly. So looking for that technical experience, sometimes a consultancy firm is a really good place to start. I started my WASH career working with a water supply company in the southeast of England. It's very small, and I got to see everything. We got to see how leaking pipes were repaired. We pulled out boreholes, and just getting that hands-on experience, I think, early on is really important, is really key. We've got some questions from Elvira and Mohamed about integration. I'm really glad you've asked those, because Christian, you touched upon this when you were sharing how in Democratic Republic of Congo, Medair, you're running very much a multi-sectorial program. So where there are population movements, you're responding with not just WASH solutions, where you're looking at community water supply, sanitation and hygiene, but also how you're supporting the delivery of safe healthcare. You showed us a picture of a maternity room. I think we've still got that on the computer here. But that nature of integrated programming, and perhaps also that feeds into the question that somebody asked about if you're yes, Elvira, you were asking as well, what areas to focus on if you haven't got a strong WASH background. I think perhaps you have a background in education or nutrition, and you can look at how WASH supports that sector of work. But now more and more, I think we're looking to have more integrated programs where WASH, healthcare, nutrition services, we're working very much hand in hand. I don't know if Christian or Nadège, you'd like to add anything. Christian, would you like to speak a bit more about the integrated approach that you're working with in DRC? I know Mohamed mentioned education. Do you still work in schools? I remember we were working in schools at one point.
Yes, Tom. I mean, in DRC, it's basically an integrated approach, multi-sectoral approach, where we intervene with the health and nutrition team. And for us, it's just basically how we design a kind of approach where in health facilities, where the health team is intervening with medications and primary health care. The WASH team will be intervening in infrastructures, for example, like providing water, providing latrines, providing showers to reduce, nosocomial disease transmission. Because while in the health, areas, it's possible that people can still get contamination, disease transmission within the health facility. So we want to be able to put those services in those health facilities to accompany the health team. So people that come for healthcare don't get other diseases because they're using those facilities that we are in. So we will put the latrines to reduce, fecal oral contamination or infections, and we will put showers so that the mothers are using that are in the maternity sections can have, a proper and dignified place for, for washing. And we will also do a lot of waste management so that the waste that's being produced within the health facility is properly taken care of, properly separated, treated and disposed of. And as well as, we will also design in such a way that we're protecting the environment. Are we capturing the wastewater? Are we capturing water from shower properly without contaminating surface water? So it's a kind of approach, and same thing with nutrition. The nutrition program, it goes alongside we building just small infrastructures that can take care for breastfeeding mothers, and we're looking at pediatric units. How can we rehabilitate them in such a way that is protective for children that are in those units? So I'm just reducing transmission that can come from surface, could be from the walls, could be from the tables, from the floors, incorporating a lot of training with the health staff in terms of infection prevention and control of diseases. So that's the way we will work alongside with the health team and the nutrition team, able to provide services. Yeah.
In my case, I have multiple examples as well, but I will go shortly. So, for example, in South Sudan, with the cholera response, we were clearly doing multi-sectorial by providing health services to affected people, but also to provide decontamination and as a wash, and then to clear up the environment by providing a better source of water and making sure no wastewater would be going to the water. So a wash response was integrated with the health providing care. Then we did, I have multiple experience of integration, because now it's very needed to do holistic work in the fields. For example, in Afghanistan, our response was integrated with nutrition, because why we wanted to help those people, they were dying from hunger. Why? Because of multiple factors, because they don't have enough money to provide for, to pay for the food. So here comes a cash distribution or a food distribution alongside wash activity, who will prevent the root cause of malnutrition by preventing diarrhea to worsen the situation of the person. So, and this was combined with the health assistance as well. So we were doing nutrition, like, those baby who were super, like they needed health assistance. So all combined is very meaningful. But if you take just the wash part of it, you don't solve the entire, malnutrition cycle. So yeah, a lot of examples.
Thank you, Nadège. And perhaps what could be helpful for us as you think about where does WASH fit into this issue is doing a problem tree analysis. So look at your context. What issues are there that you might see on the surface, and what are the roots of those issues? And you might find that water supply, sanitation, hygiene are part of those roots for other issues that you see on the surface, like Nadège and Christiane were sharing. Now, we're coming to the end of our time, and to finish, Christiane, Nadège, would you like to think back to when you would describe yourself as a junior WASH professional, and what would you tell yourself? Think back 10 years ago, what advice would you give? What's the most important thing in the job you would want to know yourself 10 years ago? The last question from Nahum.
Nadège,
yes, Nadège?
Don't kill your manager.
Right. Good advice. In what sense?
No, I'm just joking. I think, as I said, take it. It can be frustrating to take it slowly, to build up. This is my main advice to you, because you would see people who will grow in position very quickly, who will aim for a high crazy salary, but their impact in the work they are doing in the community might not be the same as if you build up knowledge in the ground, slowly, and caring all the time for the people you serve, not caring just for your career. So my advice for myself would be, which I'm trying to tell myself, don't be frustrated when you see people just aim for the money, and don't be jealous about their success, because my success for myself is to see the result in the field, not to have an amazing career.
Thank you, Nadège. Yes, Chris, a lot of people calling in, I think, from Cameroon today. Christian, I'm noticing.
Yeah, so I think I would go same with Nadège, because it could be it's a sector that could be very destructive if you're, in terms of you looking just at the money. You could, get excited. Say you start up this job 3 months, 6 months, and then oof, I'm going to the next organization. Oh, I want to be that level tomorrow. You need to have some patience. You really need to learn. And then, so I think I will go with Nadège as well. You need that patience. You need to really learn, gain some skills, and be ready for take the next level, because it could be frustrating when you get to that next level and you realize that the challenges are really more than what you thought it could be. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, Nadège, you mentioned a quartz rock. This isn't a quartz rock. This is actually a rock that I found floating in Lake Kivu outside Goma, which I keep near to me. And I think my advice would be, like this rock, or like that quartz rock that you mentioned, be a sponge, and really look to just there's so much we can learn from all the people working in the sector. And I think it's those networks, those connections, so when we're, say, working in the east of Ukraine and we're experiencing an issue and we know, oh, somebody who's worked on that previously from a previous job we've had or a connection we've had, those connections really, really help. So go meet people. There's conferences you can get to. I put in the chat earlier on, there's an environmental EEHF is a conference in May. You can join online and learn about the current trends in the sector. I really do encourage you to do that. It's been great to have you with us. We're coming to the end of our time. So do also check out the Humanitarian Leadership Academy website. We have a Kaya course page. Don't know if, Esther, you can pop that on the screen if you've got it handy. But if you want to, you can type into Kaya course page anything you want to learn about, and you'll see resources that you can follow at self-paced. But do reach out to us. It's been great to have you with us. Thank you again so much, Nadège, Christian, for making time out of your demanding schedules to be with us today. I'm really grateful to have you with us. And Christian, before I go, what's the feeling like in Goma at the moment? Democratic Republic of Congo are playing Ivory Coast tonight in the football. How are expectations? Are hopes high?
It's really high. Cameroon is out, so the guys, the Congolese guys, are telling me you need to support us today. We all gearing up for the
I'll be following the match closely. I know Ivory Coast has done very well to bring it back from the brink. I don't know how much football is being followed in Ukraine, Nadège, but perhaps not this tournament. There'll be another one in the summer. I think there's one in the summer that might get some interest. But thank you so much for being with us. Really great. Thank you again. And yes,
thank you too. All the best for your career and your choices.
Yes, exactly. We look forward to seeing these names in WASH cluster meetings, in coordination networks, and thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Esther, for your hard work in setting up this initiative and for inviting us to join in this program of a series. If you want to add anything else, I've got another slide here. Is this the right one?
Just to say a really big thank you to all of you for joining today. As you can tell, Christian and Nadège and Tom have very important jobs that are, making a real difference for people. So it's great that they've taken time out of their schedules to join us. And I learned an awful lot about what WASH careers really look like as well. I realised that I didn't actually know very much about that before listening to your accounts. If you want to look out for kind of future webinars and things that we have, I've just put a link in the chat. So if you're interested in some of our future kind of careers ones, they'll be at that link. And there's one that's specifically on AI and the humanitarian sector coming up as well. That's going to be very exciting. And we also have an upcoming event on the 20th of February called the Humanitarian Exchange, which is going to be online. I think there's around 5,000 people already registered for that. It's completely free, and there's lots of interesting sessions on lots of different humanitarian topics. So check that out if it's of interest. Yeah, and just to say thank you so much for your engagement throughout the session. I noticed that there were just so many interesting questions flooding in, so that was great.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Esther. Great. Well, Asante sana. Christian.
Thanks,
Great.
everyone.
Asante sana, muzuri, kwaheri.
Kwaheri. Dziękuję, Nadège. Dziękuję.
Yes, merci beaucoup.
Et merci. Ouais, merci beaucoup.
Excellent. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Really wonderful to have you with us. Really lovely.
Yeah.
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.